of force. Article 9 also hurts Japan's international standing, as Tollefson 18 finds the UN criticized Japan for not being in a position to fulfill peacekeeping mandates. Luckily, affirming solves, as Tollefson finds that without Article 9, UN PKO participation would be streamlined, as the Japanese parliament no longer needs to carefully monitor the security environment of the mission. Additionally, the JSDF would no longer have to have another state's forces to protect themselves in an unstable region, which would further facilitate effective UN peacekeeping. Japan would be a unique peacekeeper in Africa, as Conte 22 explains. Japan lacks a colonial past in Africa, suspicions of resource control, and hidden agendas aimed at stopping migration from the continent, which defines the mistrust towards many Western countries and China. The impact is South Sudan. Akimoto 17 finds Japan has deployed troops to South Sudan, but withdrew them in 2016 due to Article 9 restrictions. However, in the status quo, South Sudan is descending into conflict. Khartoum 21 finds Japan recently extended over $2 million in humanitarian aid to Sudan, but it's not enough, as Macho 22 finds South Sudanese vice president urged intervention to prevent war, which means Japanese peacekeepers are necessary to resolve the conflict. Hager 19 concludes PKO policies reduce the risk of major conflict by 67%. Al Jazeera 21 finds that in the previous Sudanese civil war, nearly 400,000 people were killed, and ACAPS 22 confirms that an additional 10 million people would be put at risk. For these reasons, Grace and I are proud to affirm.
Okay, before I begin case, can I have two cards?
Yeah.
One, can I have on your C1 that like the US nuclear umbrella is not enough in the region? And on your contention 2 on the impact, can I have like that they withdrew from Sudan in 2016?
Yeah, sure. I'll make a section for pro at the top, if that's okay, of the doc. That's the first card, and then
Oh, actually, can I have one more?
yeah, sure.
Can I have that like why Japan is unique for peacekeeping?
Yeah, sure. Okay, here are the three cards. I put them in. Are we okay to start case?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, is anyone not ready? Then yeah, time begins on my first word. Sorry about that. Bergen negates contention 1 is foreign aid. Article 9 has turned Japan into the fourth largest aid donor globally, providing aid to 140 countries. Furuoka 5 finds that foreign aid is the pillar of Japanese diplomacy. The government uses economic assistance to influence policies in developing countries because offensive military actions are prohibited by Article 9. Hang 19 argues that revising Article 9 undermines decades of global aid flows. Japan will lose incentives to make contributions because they don't need to rely on soft power, but will instead shift to hard power. Japanese aid outflows are critical. Addison 15 finds that infrastructure investment can lift millions out of poverty, with Japan's continuation of contributions critical. Contention 2 is a revisionist spiral. Despite occasional reinterpretation, CFR 20 finds that for 70 years, Japan's constitution has remained untouched, a symbol of democracy. Sterling 20 finds that if Article 9 is revised, all other clauses will also need to be revised because all the clauses of the Japanese constitution are interconnected on a framework of peace. Sung 19 warns that far-right groups advocating for replacing the pacifist constitution and denying wartime atrocities are growing in influence in Japanese politics. Indeed, the far-right LDP would take advantage, turning Japan authoritarian. Gordon 93 finds that a revision of Article 9 will lead to a revision of other parts of the National Charter concerning guarantees of individual rights and the status of the emperor, concluding that constitutional revision is the most dramatic concern about democracy in Japan. Thus, Rodriguez 21 finds that the country's greatest bulwark against fascism is its constitutional commitment to pacifism. The push to rebuild Japan's military would embolden military would embolden the nationalists in the area because they provoke national enemies and act aggressively to rally support. Jacobs and 12 writes that nationalist governments are 3 times more likely to start conflict. That's why Takahashi confirms that the LDP's draft revised constitution is a model for dictators everywhere. Rights would be restricted while authorities enjoy unfettered power. Indeed, Solis finds that Japan plays a central role to rekindle liberal internationalism as the country boasts one of Asia's oldest democracies, concluding that Japan's credentials matter more than ever at a time of widespread democratic backsliding. Contention 3 is US credibility. In 2019, the JCIE labeled US presence in East Asia as a crisis due to US credibility suffering while Chinese influence rose. Fortunately, Color 22 writes that Biden reasoned an approach to international affairs such as vaccine distribution and Korean peace, prioritizing domestic renewal and rebuilding US partnerships. Unfortunately, revising Article 9 reverses this trend in 2 possible scenarios. First is the drop in confidence. Affirming signals that Japan doesn't trust the US military. Wadsworth 19 finds that a Japanese offensive capability would be interpreted by neighbors as a sign that Tokyo is losing confidence in the US. That would start a chain reaction that causes more US allies to hedge with China or develop their own strike capabilities, increasing instability in Asia. But second is the blame game. The only other possibility is that Asian allies perceive constitutional revision as US-led, causing intense backlash. Kaufman 09 finds that Japan's revision of Article 9 against the backdrop of historic nationalism will have consequences for US relations with Japan's neighbors, as it appears Japan is rearming due to US support. The US will be ostracized by vital allies like Korea and Thailand. Overall, reduced confidence and increased ostracization spills over globally. Ola 21 notes that the Asia Pacific is critical to international affairs as it contains half the world. The world order will be shaped by politics and the US's role in it. Because security guarantees deter adversaries and reassure allies, Barnett 11 finds that the US military resulted in a 99% drop in deaths due to war. Brand 17 finds that US alliances deter aggressors by increasing the threats in the cost-benefit analysis, which is why Keck 14 notes that hegemonic transition periods have been the most destabilizing eras historically, with the Harvard Belfer Center finding that 75% of the last 16 power conflicts ended in war, each one killing millions. Thus negate.
Okay, really quick, can we have that second link, the card for your second link on your C3?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I put it in.
Okay, just
It's under the
yeah.
con section.
Oh yeah, okay. So we can start cross now. Can I have a question?
Sure.
Okay, so let's start on your impact on your C1, specifically about infrastructure. You tell me that infrastructure lifts millions out of poverty, right? So how much infrastructure has Japan created with their aid?
Okay, right. Our evidence is explicit when it tells you that like Japan makes a major contribution in the area of infrastructure, that like it's a major part of those million. Can I have a question now?
Wait, can I have a follow-up?
Sure.
Do you have a specific number or like where this actually happens?
I have like where it actually happens. It's like, for example, it happened in Bangladesh,
Do
in
you know how
India.
much, how like the percentage increase?
I mean, like I don't have the exact percentage, but it's a large amount. Like that's the evidence is super explicit. It's really good. The Addison 15 evidence.
All right, can we have that?
Yeah, sure.
Like after cross.
Yeah. Can I have a question now?
Yeah.
Let's talk about your like 2 warrants on like UN security on African peace. Like eh, just re-explain the warrants.
All right, so the first incentive we tell you that Japan has to peacekeep in Africa is because it wants a permanent UN Security Council seat. So basically what they achieve by peacekeeping in Africa is that they gain a lot of the support of the 54 African countries so that they can then get support for a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. And then we tell you the second incentive is just because instability in Africa harms Japanese interests. So we give you like examples of trade and then also just security for Japanese nationals.
Can I have a follow-up?
Yeah.
Why is Japan uniquely key?
Do you want why Japan is uniquely key as a peacekeeper?
Like for peacekeeping, yeah.
Yeah, so we tell you Japan is key for two reasons. Well, actually, compared to two actors. So, first, compared to like Western actors in China, Japan lacks a colonial background in Africa specifically. And the reason this is key is because then a lot of African countries don't have the same mistrust they have towards a lot of Western countries because Japan has never actually colonized parts of Africa or the Middle East. And then we tell you Japan, or we can also say that Japan is a lot better than a lot of regional African countries at peacekeeping because they not only have a lot more resources and a lot bigger military, but they also have less corruption.
Okay, sure. You can take the question.
Okay, so let's talk about your C3 on US credibility. If this actually decreases, if revising Article 9 actually decreases US credibility, then why does the US support Japan in
Right.
revision?
So even if the US supports it, right, that's the second link that we give you. It's the blame game link. When other like Asian allies perceive revision as US led, that causes intense backlash. That's the Kaufman 9 evidence. I can send that to you after cross.
Right, can I have a follow-up?
Sure.
So if like four middle schoolers in this room know that it's going to harm US credibility, how come the US is still supporting this if they know it's going to like potentially cause a bunch of wars, like you say in your
Okay. I mean, I would say like that the US takes other stuff into consideration, but that's cross.
okay.
Okay, I'm gonna take a minute of prep. Might be 30 seconds. I'm gonna put 1 minute and then, oh, sorry. I didn't realize my video turned off. I think it might have been I like closed Zoom or something. I'm sorry. I'll use a minute to see how much I need. Time starts now. Okay, that was 30 seconds. I guess since I can, oh, cat mute, yeah. Guess since I can use the chat, I'm just gonna put it in that F 30 seconds used. So quick off time roadmap. I'm going to go straight down my opponent's case. And if there's time at the end, I'm going to do a little bit of weighing if there's time. 4 minutes on the clock. If everyone is ready, time starts now. Start on our opponent's first contention on 4-8. They tell you that Japan will lose soft power capabilities, but first Cardam 21 finds that Japan recently extended $2 million in humanitarian aid, proving that they're still able to use soft power and they are willing to. But then, even if you don't buy that, there's no warrant as to why hard power can't solve conflicts. Just look at our C2 where we tell you Japan had to pull out because they did not have access to hard power. I would say that when you vote for the app, all of these foreign aid problems, such as in like Bangladesh, would actually get solved quicker because Japan has access to hard power. But then realize they have no idea about the specifics of their impact. In cross, our opponents couldn't tell you where Japan increased their aid, how much they increased, and how much infrastructure increased. You can't let them just apply such a vague infrastructure impact specifically to Japan and this topic. They can't tell you the exact percent. A large amount could mean anything. But then go to their C2 on democracy. The main problem here is that offensive capabilities do not mean that they are moving away from peace. They're simply adding a layer of protection and deterrence. But then I would say that revision wouldn't get rid of 70 plus years of pacifism. Japan still has this idea in mind. They're simply adding a layer of deterrence. Japan wouldn't just automatically turn imperialistic. But then specifically on the LDP, you can delink because we've seen a steady trend of conservative prime ministers. BBC 21 finds that Kishida's party secured more than 233 lower house seats, enough to govern without its coalition partner Komeito. The LDP has dominated Japanese politics for decades, despite everything that has happened with the COVID-19 pandemic and Abe's claims to change Article 9. This tells you that if the LDP was really so authoritarian, they wouldn't remain in power for such a long time. And then there's no implication as to why Article 9 is so important and it's going to suddenly stop this long trend of the LDP rule. But then on nationalism, you can turn because Japanese nationalism is beneficial. Kuroki 13 finds that nationalism plays an important role in foreign policymaking and Japanese politics. There can be some implications and findings that Japanese nationalism is not monolithic, that Japan's political leaders tried to reconstruct Japan's national identity through diplomacy in Asia, and that they utilize nationalism as a source of political capital. What this tells you is that they say nationalism is really bad, but we're going to tell you that actually nationalism is really beneficial to Japan. But then you can turn again because Japanese nationalism is healthy. Hammond 16 furthers, the objectives were to improve their relationship with neighboring Asian countries through exchange, demonstrate the nation's presence on the world stage, and rehabilitate Japan's image of being a beneficiary rather than a benefactor. What all of this tells you is that this nationalism is actually going to be beneficial. But then again, they have no impact here. They just tell you something about liberalism. Don't buy it. Just look at our side where we give you clean examples. But then go to their third contention. You can turn because Japan can help the US stabilize the region. They talk about how the US the influence is decreasing in Asia, which is why this is critical, as Cooley 20 finds that the COVID-19 pandemic seems to be further accelerating the erosion of US hegemony. China has increased its influence, while the US lacks both the will and resources to consistently outbid China. This tells you that the US will need Japan's military power and the trust that other Asian countries have to be able to further expand its power. We access their impact because then Japan can spread this US influence and hegemony in East Asia, which thus increases East Asian stability. You turn their impact for us. But then I would say that realize that the US literally supports Article 9 revision. So this shows that their entire third contention is false, because if 4 middle schoolers know that revision harms the US credibility and can start wars, then the US obviously want to support revision. They support it because it's going to spread their hegemony. Thus, this tells you that the US either believes the benefits outweigh the harms, which is why you're voting for us, or that this argument isn't true at all. With that being said, let's do a little bit of weighing of the impacts. First, on our C1 on China. You can outweigh on time frame because China is militarizing in the status quo, and 100 million lives is the biggest number in the round. That's why you're always going to prefer us to save the most amount of lives. But then on our C2 on African peacekeeping on time frame, Sudan is on the brink of civil war right now. The vice president urged intervention, which is why you always prefer something happening right now. Thus, for these reasons, we proudly affirm.
Okay, I'm gonna take like 40 seconds of prep time. Time starts when I give a thumbs up. Yeah, that was time. So off time roadmap is just going to start on our case, then go down theirs. Time starts now. Start on our second contention about credibility. Currently, security guarantees are strong. However, if Japan revises Article 9, it is viewed as driven by America, causing our allies to no longer trust us, collapsing guarantees. Because it deters enemies and reassures allies, American security guarantees have led to a 99% decrease in death, as great power transition wars would kill millions. They give you two responses. The first is that US credibility is decreasing. No, our evidence from 2022 tells you that Biden is trying to increase credibility in South Korea, in like all of the countries in East Asia. But then they try to tell you that the US supports a revision. That concedes our link. We tell you that other East Asian allies will perceive a revision as US led. That's the like whole thesis of our argument. But then go to their first contention about Chinese gray zone warfare. At the top, Wadsworth 19 writes that it would be at least a decade until Japan would have a usable, independent, conventional missile strike capability because they have mountains of debt and little experience. Thus, we outweigh on time frame because our arguments trigger immediately. You can kick their time frame weighing off the flow. But then they talk about Chinese gray zone tactics. First, gray zone tactics cannot be deterred. As Rand 19 explains, the whole point of gray zone approaches is to remain below the threshold of armed conflict. That's really important because no military, not even Japan, is likely to stop gray zone tactics from happening. But then, even if you buy this argument, it's non-unique because Kraska 20 writes that while Japan operates within the pacifist constitution, it has authority to respond to the full range of threats in the gray zone. Our evidence is just more specific. But even then, you turn this argument to our side, because while China currently operates in the gray zone, affirming causes direct conflict through A, perceptions, as Anthony O2 writes, that any change in Article 9 would immediately be perceived in Beijing as a clear signal that Japan has succumbed to nationalist forces. But B, hardliners, as Shorin 16 explains, an offensive Japan can provoke massive retaliation by hawks in Beijing. When weighing, prefer our turns on probability because you see none of their impacts happening now, but when Japan takes concrete offensive action to push back on China, you raise the chances of the accidental war they talk about. Go to their impacts on Taiwan. Westcott 19 finds that China has not attacked Taiwan for 70 years, as Taiwan has spent the entire time preparing. But then on Senkakus, Carson 13 explains that when China and Japan have appeared to ready to battle over the islands, nothing has happened because both sides are willing to negotiate. Go to their second two about peacekeeping in Africa. They give you two warrants. The first is the UN Security Council. Even if they get to join the UN Security Council, China is in the UNSC, which means that China will veto all of everything that Japan passes. And even then, they literally can't join because China has veto power for joining. But second, their warrant is instability in Africa harms Japanese trade. That's literally just not true. Japan trades with other countries. Africa is a drop in the bucket. On the specifics of Sudan, there is no link because none of their evidence says that Japan actually wants to play the role of mediator in this conflict. Japan doesn't want to for two reasons. A, it's not close to Japan geographically whatsoever, but B, Japan has no unique leverage that would situate it to do better in conflict. But then there's no link, as Japan already had peacekeeping in Sudan, but withdrew in 2017. There's two implications. A, there's no link because Japan already has the capability to send peacekeepers to other countries, but B, it means that it's non-unique because Japan doesn't want to send troops. That means they'll never do it whether or not you affirm. Even then, it's non-unique again there's no reason why Japan is uniquely better than the UN. All of their evidence says that it's already happening in the status quo. Everything that they say will happen when you affirm is happening right now. Thus, you're always going to negate.
Okay. Are you ready for cross?
Yeah, whenever you are.
Okay. Time starts now. Can I have first question?
Sure.
Okay, let's talk about my C2. So, right. So in rebuttal, you tell me, you give me this example of Japan sending troops already, but they pulled out in 2017. Can you tell me why they pulled out?
I mean, I don't know, but insofar as they got those troops to Sudan in the first place, that means that they have the capability to do so. I'll take a question now.
Go for it.
Okay. So on the why is Japan the only actor that can step into Sudan, right? The UN is there right now. Your evidence tells me that.
Right. So basically what we're saying, maybe you can tell me the evidence where we talk about the UN being there, but no, our UN link was just saying that UN requires peacekeepers to use force. But regardless, I would say that Japan is uniquely situated right now because it lacks this colonial past in Africa, which other Western countries such as the US have.
Okay, right. But it's not only the US. So there are other countries in the world that haven't invaded Africa in the past, right?
Okay. Yeah, but we can send you our evidence. I think we already sent it.
It's not about the evidence. It's just logically.
Okay.
Okay, sure. But also I have another question. Is that okay? Okay.
Sure.
Why does Japan want to go to the literally across the globe? Why?
That's why we give you the two incentives. First is the UN seat, and then second is for security reasons.
So how do they join the UNSC if China has veto power?
So here then we're just gonna be weighing, right? So 54 African countries versus one China. Let's see which one is.
I mean, if China has veto power in the UNSC, they're not going to allow Japan to join. And Japan let's use your logic, right? If four middle schoolers in a debate round know that Japan cannot join the UNSC because China will veto them, I'm sure that Japan would know the same thing, meaning that they won't go to Africa.
And that's the problem there. I would say that Japan can get in because even though China has veto power, a part of the UN is, I know they have to be a part of the UN is that they have to discuss. There's diplomacy. There's all that things. The thing is, right? It doesn't matter as long as Japan sees that they have 54 African African allies on their side. And yes, there might be one China, but when you have all these countries that are supporting this and one China that's trying to like veto it, the thing is here, when you like have these discussions and debates that constantly go on the UN, it's going to overpower them. We spent a long time.
Okay. Yeah, take your question.
Okay, so let's talk about, okay, that's like 17 seconds. Okay, I'll come up. Okay, so let's talk about your C3, right, on this US credibility thing. So Biden's trying to like increase US influence, right? So is this working in the status quo? You said
it is working. There are peacekeeping operations by Biden in South Korea, in like all of East Asia, essentially. That's cross.
Okay, so Grace took 30 seconds of prep. So we have, actually, I'll just take a minute 30 starting now. That's a minute 30. I'll take 30 more seconds of prep starting now. Okay, that was 30 seconds. Off time roadmap is going to go our case, Wang, and then their case. Is everybody ready? Okay, my time starts now. You're voting for us off of our first argument about China. Murano 21 finds that China's gray zone warfare aimed at altering the status quo is becoming increasingly bold and has started provocations in Taiwan. Amending Article 9 solves as Klinger 21 finds Japanese offensive abilities increase the price of any attack, enhancing deterrence and regional stability. It also shows that Japan will come to the defense of Taiwan. Murano concludes that if China suffers damage to their own offensive capability, it'll find itself unable to achieve its military goals. They have a few responses here. First, they say it's going to be a decade for Japan to get a military. We would actually say that Japan has the defensive capabilities now because many defensive capabilities can actually be used offensively, but Article 9 just prevents them from using it this way. Once you amend, they already have these offensive capabilities. Then they say that gray zone conflict cannot be deterred, but realize they contradict themselves with their next response because then they say that Japan can respond to these attacks. But let's still respond to it. We would actually say that Japan increases deterrence. That's our entire link. Then they say that Japan can respond to threats in the gray zone, but insofar as tensions are still rising, obviously this like defensive deterrence is not working. But then they also miss our lift evidence in case, which tells you that reforms and reinterpretations don't work. And that's why Band of 17 concludes that without formal constitutional revision, there's no way to fundamentally transform Article 9's interpretation or the scope of scenarios in which Japan can use force overseas. Then they say that revision will be perceived in China that Japan is nationalist. But first, this is a cross-up of their nationalist argument, but they drop the response we made in rebuttal where we say that revision doesn't get rid of 70 years of pacifism because even if they get these abilities, Japan can still be pacifist. This takes out the response, they concede it cleanly. Then they say that offensive Japan just provokes China. Again, there's no warranting here, but but our link chain is basically just an entire response to this. Then they say that China has an attack. This doesn't matter because we tell you it's going to happen now, which is why it's so crucial to affirm. Then they talk about the Senkakus, but we're going to focus on Taiwan. Thus, you can cleanly extend our impact of a war killing 100 million people. Now let's move on to some Wang. First, you're going to prioritize China because of time frame, because we tell you China is militarizing in the status quo. Our Lin evidence and our AP and Chung evidence tell you that China is making advancements in Taiwan right now. And our Lin evidence tells you that once we notice any extreme signs, it's too late. That's why it's so important to vote for us today. But we also outweigh on scope because 100 million lives is the biggest number in the round. Any chance of our impact happening outweighs theirs. But then also we prerequisite because Chinese deterrence prevents East Asian war, because a war with China would cause East Asian instability. But then let's go on to their case. As long as we win our case and outweigh, we win. But let's go on to their case. First, on their third contention on the U.S. credibility. Realize that they dropped this really crucial turn that loses them the round, where we tell you that Japan can help the U.S. to stabilize the region when you affirm, because Japan can spread U.S. democracy. Thus, we access their impact because Japan can still spread U.S. influence and hegemony in East Asia, which increases East Asian stability. This acts as a terminal defense on their case. Don't let them get away with it. But then also realize that the US literally supports Article 9 revision, which tells you that their argument just isn't true, because if the US knew it was true, then they wouldn't support revision. Thus, at the end of the day, there's no place but to vote for the affirmative.
Okay, Arif took 40 seconds, I think. I'll take a minute and 20. I'll give you a thumbs up when I start. Okay, yeah. Oh wait, one sec. Okay, yeah. The order is going to be their side on China, our side on credibility, and then I'm gonna weigh. Start on their side. They go for this argument about gray zoning. Extend the first response that we give. It takes a decade until Japan can develop an offensive conventional military. That outweighs on time frame because it kicks like the impacts don't trigger before their impacts happen. They say that like the weapons are dual use. That's like not true. Like a bunch of weapons can't be used offensively, like missiles, for example. Like Japan doesn't have like that's just not true. But B, Japan is in debt, so they can't spend money switching. Two implications. One, our impacts trigger before theirs do, which means you always prefer us, but B, China will take advantage. Even then, on gray zone, they say like we contradict on like the response that says it can't be deterred, they say we contradict ourselves. Just cross the other response off the flow. Look at the three like backlines they gave. One is that like it increases deterrence. Like insofar as you can't deter a gray zone attack, like that's the purpose of a gray zone attack. Deterrence doesn't work. But B, like they say you can't respond, the same response applies. But C, the reinterpretation doesn't even apply. With that, go to the impacts. We tell you that China's never going to invade Taiwan, that that's because like Ukraine, their warrant about Ukraine disincentivizes them. They see like steeper resistance than expected from Ukraine. They say like, no, it's happening right now. They don't have a single warrant for this. We're the only side with a warrant, so you always prefer us. I'll respond to their weighing later. Let's go to our case. The best argument in the round is our argument about credibility. Currently, security guarantees are strong. However, if Japan revises Article 9, it's viewed as driven by America, causing our allies to no longer trust us, collapsing guarantees. On the turn, they miss the response that RF gives you. A, like there's no warrant on the turn. You don't vote on it. We're the only side with the warrant, which is threat perception. But B, like insofar as they don't have a warrant, you don't grant them any access. That's important because like it kicks the turn. But even then, the only other thing they extend is like that the US supports it. That's really, really problematic because the US like isn't like the smartest group in the world. The US supported the Middle East intervention, and look how well that turned out. The US doesn't make perfect decisions. That's really important because it means you like that response doesn't apply at all. With that, you go to the weighing. We're a fundamental short circuit to their argument. Our military capability and umbrella make sure that negotiations are working. That's the deterrence they're talking about. On their side, when you see that other countries ramp up militarization rather than cooperation, that prevents their operations and deterrence from working. That's important because it means that also solves for their prerequisite, and you weigh this over all of their weighing because link weighing comes before impact weighing. That's important because it means that if you buy our argument, it like takes out their argument, so you always prefer us, which is why you always negate.
Okay, is everyone ready for cross? Okay, time starts now. Can I have a question?
Sure.
So let's talk about how like your response that the US doesn't make good decisions. Like how does this response even apply to the situation at all?
Right. So like you tell me that the US supports a revision, right?
Yeah.
The like fundamental problem with that is that the US's judgment isn't perfect. They supported the Middle East intervention. They supported pulling out of Afghanistan. I can probably give you like 4 other examples.
Right, but the thing is, if your argument is as clear as you say, then how come the US like still supports revision? Like if it's this clear to the point that a bunch of middle schoolers can detect that it's going to like start a bunch of East Asian wars, why does the US still support it?
Again, like a bunch of middle schoolers, as you say, could detect that pulling out of Afghanistan would lower US credibility, but they still did it anyway. And even then, even if you don't buy that, support, like the whole argument is that it's going to be perceived that the US is the one who backs the revision.
Oh wait, then can I have like a follow-up question?
We spent a minute on this. Can I
Yeah, we spent a
can I have just like a really quick question?
Sure.
I mean, fine.
Okay, so you say that the US pulling out of Afghanistan decreased credibility, right?
Yeah.
So what effect has that decrease in credibility led around the world?
It decreased the US credibility for a while, but Biden is like
but
bringing that back
that's
up.
the uniqueness we read from like literally a month ago, which tells you that US credibility is increasing right now when you affirm all of that goes
Right,
away.
but what happened when it decreased?
I mean, that was in Afghanistan. That's a completely different region than what we're
but it's still about US credibility.
Afghanistan's
a totally different thing.
Right.
That you can't bring that up as a
okay, no.
They're not like okay, yeah. So
like Afghanistan doesn't apply because like tensions aren't as like high in that area. But B, like you said that I can't use it. Sure, I can. Like that's still an example of the US judgment. It's completely different things. Can I have a question? We spent 2 minutes of cross on this.
Yeah, sure.
Like, how does, if you can't deter a gray zone attack, how is an increase in deterrence going to solve? Like that makes sense.
First of all, you guys literally contradict yourself in rebuttal where you like give this one response about how gray zone warfare can't be deterred, and then you say that Japan is deterring gray zone warfare.
Okay, yeah, sure. Drop everything we read about Japan deterring gray zone.
You can't just tell us to drop it because like
I mean, yeah, we can. That's how debate works. But like
I know, but we responded to it and you guys didn't say that in summary.
No, I did say cross the like response about like they can do it right now off the flow because it's like that just doesn't apply here.
And even if we contradict ourselves, we tell you that like Japan can do it right now. Even if it's not working, nothing changes because they already have everything they need to do it right now. You tell me that defensive weapons can be used offensively. Their defensive weapons are being like used.
No, we tell you that defensive weapons can be used offensively, but they can't like Japan can't use them offensively because of Article 9. But if there wasn't no Article 9, they could still use these weapons offensively. That's the end of cross.
Okay, so
We have 30 seconds of prep left, so we'll start that when I mute, starting now.
Okay. So quick off-time roadmap. My speech is going to mirror summary. So I'm going to start on our case, the AF case, Wang, and then their case. So AF, Wang, neg. If everyone is ready, time starts now. Start on our case. The easiest way to vote for AF is on our C1 on China. Murano 21 finds that China is becoming increasingly bold in Taiwan, thus amending Article 9 solves, as Murano finds that if China suffers damage to its own offensive capability, it will find itself unable to achieve its military goals. On frontlining, first they say it would take a decade before Japan can get military capabilities. We would actually say that Japan has its capabilities right now. They just cannot use it because of Article 9. They say it's not true, but they give you no warranting, prefer all the evidence that we extend throughout the round. But then they say gray zone cannot be a deterrent, but realize that they contradict themselves with their next response because they say that Japan can respond to these attacks. But then insofar, tensions are still rising, so this response doesn't work. But then they say that China hasn't attacked. This doesn't matter because, again, we tell you what's happening right now. Our Chung evidence tells you China is already militarizing. Then they bring up this new response about Ukraine in second summary. One, it's too late because it doesn't give us time to respond. But then second, it's just our narrative. Thus, you can cleanly extend our impact of a war killing 100 million people. On to weighing. First on time frame, China is militarizing in the status quo. Judge, this means that every minute you don't vote for the AF team, China gets closer to Taiwan. They say that their impacts will take a longer time to happen since perception changes and chain reactions will take years upon years to happen. But then on scope, 100 million lives is still the biggest number in the round. You can automatically vote for us here. But then on pre-rank, their weighing isn't even responsive. Extend how we increase Asian stability. Judge, as long as we win our case and our impacts outweigh, we automatically win the round. But still, let's extend some responses. They say the U.S. supports revision. They say that this concedes their link, but they can see that the U.S. government obviously believes the benefits of revision outweighs the harms. This takes out their entire argument because you prefer the U.S. government over a middle schooler's claims. But then I would say that there's no warrant because Japan is one of the world's most democratic countries and a huge U.S. ally. But then reiterate their exact wording that Biden's trying to increase influence, but it's not working. Thus, to save 100 million lives, you vote for the F.
Okay, I believe I have a minute left. Correct me if I'm wrong. Great, so time starts when I give a thumbs up. Okay, that was time. Off time roadmap, it's just going to be like some valid directive language. It's going to be our case, their case, with weighing throughout. Time starts now. Judge, my opponents are trying to muddle up the debate round, but at the end of the day, there are two questions going through your head right now. The first is how is US credibility in the status quo? We tell you that currently security guarantees are strong. However, if Japan revises Article 9, it is viewed as driven by America, causing our allies to no longer trust us, collapsing guarantees, and leading to our impact of a regional hegemony war, which leads to millions of deaths. They give you a couple of responses. The first is that security guarantees aren't strong right now. No, our evidence from just last month tells you that the US is doing multiple projects around East Asia, increasing credibility. But then they say that the US supports a revision. I would say that A, the US doesn't have the best judgment. You've seen that in Afghanistan, you've seen that in the Middle East. But B, it concedes our link because we tell you that because the US is fueling the idea of revising Article 9, other allies are going to perceive a revision as US led. Then they say that Japan is a huge ally, meaning that they can spread hegemony. No, our link is about other countries turning away from the US and the entire security guarantee collapsing, triggering their impact of a China-US war. That's important because you remember the analysis Sahaj gives you. If credibility is high right now, that acts as a short circuit. Remember the evidence from case and summary that says that China can never become a regional power surrounded by US allies. If they cannot become a regional power, they don't have the capability to attack Taiwan. But then the second question that's going through your head is, can Japan deter a gray zone attack? No, our evidence tells you that no country can deter a gray zone attack, but even if you believe that, Japan is trying to defend a gray zone attack right now. But then they missed the warrant for a Taiwanese invasion not happening. They concede this. We tell you that for the last 70 years, China has not invaded Taiwan. There's no reason for why China wants to take Taiwan right now. At that point, you always negate.
Good round. You guys did
Good
really
round,
well.
y'all.
Good round, everyone. And
Yeah, great round.
Judges, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for judging.
judging.
I need to call some stuff. So I think it's actually all from Bergen. Bergen, let me see nobody can deter gray zone.
Yeah.
And let me
Yeah.
see the other countries perceive it as US led.
Okay. I'll put it at the bottom of that document actually.
Can you actually put it at the top? Because
Okay, yeah, that works.
I was gonna call for one of those cards also, so.
Wait, what was the second one you asked for?
The perception of US led.
Okay, let me get that.
Okay, yeah. The gray zone tactics is in. Second is US led.
Yeah, I put both of them in.
Okay, cool.
Take your time, but I've already done my decision. I just want to let the other two judges know.
From Potomac, can I see the Taiwan invasion uniqueness?
Wait, can you repeat that? Sorry. Wait, Grace, can you mute?
Can I just see the like any evidence for the Taiwan invasion?
Yeah, we can like send you like our bright line.
Just just anything that says they're gonna invade Taiwan.
Okay. I'll put it at the bottom of the dock, but basically we're sending I'll put it at the top of pro then, I guess. Okay.
Just
Yeah,
put
so
it so it's easy to find.
yeah, can you see that? It's like at the top of pro. But we're basically sending cards that like talk about Ukraine and then also the bright line. And then like current escalation.
Just let me know when it's in there.
All right. Okay, there are like 4 cards in there.
Okay, sick, that works.
Oh, sorry, I just added another card and it's basically the Murano we read at the top of our case.
Okay, great. I was the last Smith. I can announce. Um, Huge congratulations to both teams. I was in quarters last year, so y'all did so much better than I did. You made it farther than me. This is like I cannot overstate how big of an accomplishment this is for everybody. You're all have such bright futures in this activity, so stick with it. The decision was a 2-1 for Bergen. I didn't squirrel, so whoever did squirrel, you can go first.
Yeah, that was me. I voted for pro Potomac, Catherine and Grace. Yeah, it was definitely close, and I think that okay, so I'm just gonna go over my notes. So first off, I think I think the one thing about like the con team was that a lot of them I felt like it was like for example, it just wasn't like convincing to me. Like for example, like how like Japan does not need like hard power, just needs soft power and pacifism, and it provokes nationalism. I don't think the nationalism, in my opinion, was tied really well to the Khan case. This is from his constructive, and then afterwards, in Crossfire, they were talking about U.S. takes more consideration, and I just felt like they were, and then later on in later crosses, they were also talking about how U.S. credibility and China credibility, that kind of stuff. For me, like I just don't think it was so relevant and weighs so much on the Khan case because of how credible U.S. is. It's sort of general. I need something that ties with like it's like a US Japan. You need to have Japan in there in your contention. And I think like the problem with me with the Khan side argument, it's I felt like they spoke really well and it was organized. It just like a lot of times they were focusing solely on US and like very detached from Japan. And the debate is about whether Japan, the central player here is Japan. So I felt a lot of their arguments were too general about U.S. in general, like how credible U.S. is, like it's like how blue is the sky, it's just like it's too general. It doesn't tie specifically to Japan, and it doesn't tie specifically to Japan's like whether or not you should give Article 9 to Japan. So it just doesn't answer the question. Whereas I think the Grace and Catherine team, they like whatever they do, they always tie it back to Japan more than the Khan team did. Like for example, COVID, China influence, they tied to Japan because how they were talking about how Japan was reacting to that. And then after this is Grace's what is it called, rebuttal, and then they also specified she was asking you rebuttal like how much was not specified in the Khan case. And I do agree because I like I said, I felt like it was too general. So when Grace pointed out it wasn't specific how much was not specific, I was like, okay, that's kind of what I was thinking too. So she was kind of speaking my mind there. So I was like, so just little things there, and then like I mean, Khan, like Arif was a little bit better in his rebuttal when it comes to specificity, because he did say that the pro case was non-unique, and so he did point it out. But I think it was more of a Khan's problem than the pro's problem. But he was trying to do the right thing for me here, and he was saying that pro wasn't specific either, like there are non-unique contentions. But then I just see more non-unique contentions in pro than in Con, that in Con than in pro, sorry. And so and then the two questions, like the final caucus area, I was asking how is you, like again he was talking about U.S. credibility, and I was like, okay, it doesn't really affect Japan. And then his second question was, can U.S. deter gray zone attack? And then the answer is no. And I was like, okay, that's great. So how does that tie to Japan again? again, I was like, okay, you could say that just because US does not have the best judgment, like Japan can use that to their advantage by revising Article 9. So like again, it wasn't tied to Japan, and you know, whether how US has best judgment, and it was too vague for me. Like for me, I'm looking for specificity here, and again, pro was just more specific to the point than con.
Jing Jing, you timed out. Hello? Is that my internet? Is that her internet?
Nah, yeah.
You cut out for me too.
You cut out. Did you finish? I don't want to cut you off. Did you?
It took too long. You can go now. I don't know what happened. You can go.
Oh no, that was fine. I was just making sure that you finished what you were saying. You know.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to go, Zeke, or did you want me to go?
Nah, you got it.
Okay, cool. So for me, I voted con. There was a couple reasons why. We'll go ahead and start on the pro flow. When it came to the impact, I looked at that and it says that, and I think that the evidence says that it's capable of war, but not that it's going to war. Like it's able to do it, but it doesn't say that it's going to attack Iran. It just shows intent, but that intent needs to be discussed that way, as in this is intent on it, doesn't mean that they will actually go to that. So but that debate wasn't had, and I'm not trying to interject that. That's just what I would have liked to hear on that. Regarding that. Now on the China, I'm not really sure because I didn't really give you the impact on that. I didn't really give you the China for that, because when it came to the impact debate, I looked at the US credibility, and I went under the, I thought that the narrative was on that was pretty strong, and that when they talked about security guarantees and how being American-led leads to no trust, which leads to a regular hedge war, which leads to millions of deaths. Like I thought that narrative was pretty clear, and I would have liked from the pro to hear like a comparison argument between like to show which, because I mean both of you guys talk about like millions of people dying, but I would have liked to hear a comparison in between 100 million and why that is the biggest impact in the round in comparison to millions from what's going on. Even something that says like a quantitative number is better than a non-quantitative number, right? Or quantitative number. But that was one of the things for me. The other one is this time frame argument. Going into the final focus, like I would have liked to get a little bit better. There was the analytic that came from the summary from the con, from their prerequisite argument. They didn't say, which con, by the way, if you're going to do a prerequisite argument in the summary, it needs to be extended into the final focus, and you need to say this is their prerequisite way before this, because that actual analysis would have like sealed the deal instead of having to do a comparative analysis. I mean, comparing the two on my end for that, because I don't like to interject anything from in my decision making from that. Now, because of that, I gave them US credibility. I gave them the impact. It ended up with a way, because I had that question, which wasn't answered into the final focus, which I had to take what I had and assess from what happened in the debate. So because of that, with that, I gave them the way. I was going until like I was following the agency of ability, but I felt like I needed more. Like, why is this more important than, you know, deterrence or even solving for how is Asian stability different than what's currently going on. But there was, like I said, there was just, I needed more from that. And because I didn't get more with the impact scenario, that's the reason that I voted con, in short, without going too long. But if you have any questions, like as always, I have my link in the ballot. Feel free to email me if you have any questions on that, but you could totally see my flow link in my ballot. So yeah, sorry for dragging it out, but go for it.
Yeah. That was a, not that you were dragging on, just, oh yeah, I'll go now. This is a really great round to judge. Why I voted for Bergen, I buy the front line on the link level that other countries perceive the US as bad for supporting Japan. At that point, I don't buy this response from Potomac that the US government would also know about the decision that they're making. Like, this is completely unpersuasive to me and it's just all rhetoric. I don't know why y'all are extending this. Your first turn about like putting stability into the region would have been a lot more strategic to go for, because it was pretty dropped by the neg and rebuttal. If y'all would have went for that, I would have probably affirmed, but unfortunately you didn't in this round. From the neg, the evidence about like perception is pretty good, so I pulled the trigger here. As bad as the prereq weighing from the neg was in final, I caught some of it, or at least the buzzwords for it, so I did evaluate it. If I want to look to the affirmative, I'm okay with conceding as a debater one contradictory response and going for another, but that's just for me. I don't think that this matters insofar as A, the scenario that the AF is going for is not a gray zone scenario, and B, I think the affirmative's Taiwan invasion evidence isn't talking about a gray zone scenario. So I actually give both teams like full access to the link. I think that this Ukraine implication is completely new in summary, so I'm not evaluating it. So I look to the weighing on this time frame weighing. I think that the first implication that Arav gives in rebuttal is that you've never seen the invasion before and they've had like all the impetus to do so. So I think that kicks out of the time frame weighing. At that point, I look to the prereq from the neg before I look to the short circuit from the AF, because this short circuit isn't comparative. It's like super blippy and unwarranted. So this is a very, very tight round, but I ended up negating for Bergen. Great round, y'all.
Thank you so much for judging.
Yeah, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
judging
much,
and for your
and
feedback.
yeah.
And good luck to my opponents in finals.
Thank you. And good
Good
luck
luck
at
in
like future
finals.
tournaments.